Round 3 of the FIDE Grand Prix tournament in Tashkent was very hard fought, and I'm going to take you through a couple of those games. First of all, Vachier-Lagrave against Vachier-Lagrave. So, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave leading the tournament, and you'll remember in round 1 he had a very good victory against Fabiano Caruana in the Najdorf variation, and Vachier-Lagrave decided to take him on in exactly the same system. So you can see it's an English attack, Vachier-Lagrave with the white pieces, and this is, you could say, the absolute main line of the English attack. Here, the variation that I rather like is A5, and this has had quite a lot of success. But Vachier-Lagrave continues with knight d7 that he played against Caruana. This is the absolute main line. So white throws his pawns forward on the king side. It's not just about a king side attack. So you're also looking to gain control over d5 and sometimes control important squares on the queen side as well. b5, black needs counterplay. And now Caruana against Vachier-Lagrave continue with rook g1, but MVL was very well prepared. In this game, Vachier-Lagrave plays g5, which is the old move, very straightforward. b4, so this is very well known. And now if white exchanges here, black can take on c3, so white now has to recapture, and knight f6. Now after this exchange of pawns and pieces, actually this has turned out very well for black because the knight is no longer under pressure here, and black has gained open files to attack white's king, so this is a favourable exchange. So here the knight has to come back. Now the knight's attacked and has to go back. f4, it looks very dangerous, but actually black's queenside play is, well, just in time. It looks very scary, but it has been seen, well, literally hundreds of times before in professional chess, this exact position. And then knight d4 is an interesting move here, but, well, pawn takes, this is the absolute main line. And now there's a nice drawing variation, actually. If white checks on f7, and then rook takes a2. Now, after this move, it feels as though white is gaining control over the light squares. You know, after bishop c4, for example, maybe knight coming to f5 looks promising for white. But now this nice move, rook takes bishop, and black is actually able to force a draw by perpetual check in this way, queen a6, and so on. There's no more than a draw, but it's fine for black, and that's been seen many times in various games. So instead, c takes b3, but we're still on known paths here. This mainline Najdorf theory runs very deep. And rook takes check, and the knight comes to g3. I'm going to stop in a second when we get to a new position. Now black's pieces come out. At the moment, you know, this bishop looks very good, but obviously white's king has been weakened and black is able to find counterplay. So this is a nice move. Just looking at these squares and supporting the rook. And white plays rook f1. Black exchanges, and now all the rooks are exchanged, and black breaks in the middle with d5. This move so often in Najdorf gives black excellent counterplay, so you use your central pawn majority to finally break out. Now this position has been seen in several games. For example, Caruana against Gelfand from the Moscow Tal Memorial Tournament in 2013, where Caruana played h4 and his bishop was knocked back to rather a poor square on g1, and Gelfand ended up winning a very nice game. So Vachier-Lagrave clearly has done his homework and came up with queen f2. But not even this move is a novelty. there have been several computer games played with exactly this move, Queen F2, and well, those games continue with Queen C6, and that was also satisfactory for black. But here, MVL, obviously very well prepared, played G6, which looks like a very logical move to me, because it takes away these squares from the knight. H4. And now, well, I think if black wanted to play in a more complex way, you could check and then close the position. And I think this is probably also okay for black. But I can understand why Maxime didn't want to play like this, because, you know, white does have a little bit of play here on the light squares. Instead, he played Queen F8, and I think this is a much safer way to play. Radjabov really has to exchange queens here, otherwise black has decent counterplay on the f-file. Now, at first glance, it seems as though white actually has a pretty good position here, because black's king is way out of play in the corner, and these bishops, you know, they have potentially, well, very good prospects. So let's have a look at this. You know, at first glance, you might imagine white is doing extremely well here, because the black's knights here are really tied up. Obviously, they're protecting each other, but they can't move. You know, this knight on e4 looks very well placed as well. Also, you know, black's bishop here looks a bit trapped in. But h6, excellent move from MVL, and the fight back starts here. He's starting to break out. And in fact, after this exchange, he simply brought his king into the middle. And crucially, white cannot bring his king through into black's position. All these squares are covered, and there's simply no way through. And here, well, the king threatens just to come across and drive the bishop out, and black is fine. Notice that after this exchange with h6, then white is, you know, this pawn is vulnerable, and white is running out of pawns. So Radjabov simply decided to trade here, and well, he cashed in. He won a pawn, but it's only symbolic. And after these exchanges, basically, there aren't enough pawns on the board. And here, well, they actually agreed to draw, but this is a very simple draw. The bishop has to take care of this pawn, and then the king and bishop can simply block here, and there's nothing going on. So draw agreed. So MVL was tested a little bit there, but really drew fairly easily. Now I'd like to look at the game between Mamedyarov and Gelfand. Shahriar Mamedyarov with the white pieces, and he has pressure. His rook is looking good here, but Gelfand has defended well. This knight in particular looks very well placed, controlling lots of key squares, can't be driven away, and the bishop isn't wonderful on e2. It's hard to bring that into the game. If you take on a6, then black just recovers this pawn. But Mamedyarov kept playing for a win. Rook c6. Looks as though black is getting very nice counterplay here. If white isn't careful, black could easily be better here, because this knight is such a strong piece. But Mamedyarov had an idea in mind. He sacrificed the exchange. Now he's using his space advantage. These pawns are far advanced, and with the support of the king and bishop, then this is dangerous. So, well, you know, if black defends passively, I mean, this will be a disaster. Then, you know, the king can move in anyway and take this pawn and support the d pawn as well. So, sensibly, Gelfand plays actively. First the king comes across, and then the rook comes down. So, looking to gain counterplay by attacking this pawn, but also hassling the king as well. Mamedyarov defends with bishop f1 and prepares to advance the rook's pawn. Bishop must move. And now here is where Gelfand made a mistake. Let me just go through to the end of the game very quickly. Gelfand took on g2, and I think this was, well, I'll show you what I think he missed. So the rook comes back, and I think Gelfand probably saw a7. He brings the rook back to defend, and here this should be a draw, for example, here, and, well, okay, all the pawns get liquidated basically, and they reach a position where black draws this because this is the wrong colour bishop. It can't control this square. It's a well-known theoretical draw. The king just stays in the corner. But instead of pushing with a7, Mamedyarov found an excellent move, king c5. I'm sure this is what Gelfand missed. Not easy to see a retreat with the king, but after this, white is winning. The point is, the king comes back and blocks black's king out, and now it's able to support the d pawn. So the rook comes back, it has to stop the a pawn. And now great move with the bishop. So the bishop is able to cover the king here from c6. And these pawns are too much. So for example, after g5, then just bishop c6, and then the d pawn goes through. See, that bishop is really working overtime. It controls these squares, blocks the rook out. So king back, this is the game. h4, good move, paralysing these pawns. By the way, the king had to come back there to stop the d pawn. And now Gelfand tried to gain counterplay with this passed pawn, but this is controlled easily. h3, g7, and now bishop c6. And after this move, Gelfand resigned. What a hard-working bishop. Controls the h1 square, hits the rook. Of course the rook can't take because the g-pawn queens, that's why the g-pawn was advanced. And after this, a7, so the bishop is able to support its own pawn and stop the h-pawn queening, and white wins. Right, let's go back. What could Gelfand have played here instead? Instead of taking on g2, he should have brought the king back. So this keeps this d-pawn under lock and key. And now here's a crucial moment. a6 still looks very dangerous. If black takes, then the a-pawn goes through because that bishop controls the a2 square, and after check, king just comes back here. So the rook can't check here. White wins. But after a6, you throw in a check on b2. Now if the king retreats, then king c5 actually wins for black, because if a7, then we take here and there's a rook check there. And let's just go back, and after check, so the bishop has to block, and then you can take. That's important to gain counterplay. And now rook a2, the rook is able to come behind. Now if bishop a6, then we can just keep checking. So king b7 takes, and this is an easy draw. Well, for example, well, we can actually give away all these pawns, and once again it's this position, a theoretical draw, very well known theoretical draw. It's the wrong colour for this square, and you can't shift the black king out. So there we go. Gelfand tired at the end of the session, I think, but very easy to overlook a move like king c5, retreating with the king. I'm sure that's what happened. So after 3 rounds, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave is still in the lead with 2.5 points, and Nakamura, Andreikin and Karyakin are tied with 2 points, a half point behind. Mamedyarov 1.5 points, and Caruana and Gelfand on 1 out of 3. They seem a bit tired after Baku.